Welcome to the Writer at Work podcast. Ms. Catherine M.H. and Kit Boyer are your co-hosts. They will be bringing you updates on their journey to becoming full-time authors, as well as writing advice, book reviews, and information to help you on your road to authordom. Join these authors as they work on their writing careers.
Hey there, it's Miss Catherine M.H. and my co-host, Kit Boyer. This month of March, we're going to be talking about writing careers. Our focus today is serialized fiction, so we have a few guests here with us today. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
I'm Christine Daigle, co-host of the Serial Fiction Show, and I write 2 serials on Kindle Vella, sci-fi and horror.
And I'm JP Rindfleisch, the other co-host of the Serial Fiction Show, and also co-host to Right Away podcast. And I write a urban fantasy comedy, Kindle Vella.
Nice. That's really cool. We're really glad to have you both here today. This is the first time I'm meeting you, although Kate has known you for a bit, and she talks about you sometimes, so it's good to put faces to the names. Kate's mouthing, all bad stuff.
All good things, I don't know.
So, you guys ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
Let's start with, what is serial fiction? And kind of like, is there different types of serial fiction, or is it all just one thing?
That is a great question. Yeah, so serial fiction is ongoing fiction. So there's no definite end, the way that there is in a novel. So it can go on really as long as the author likes, as long as they want, or as short as they want, or you can make modifications depending on audience feedback, and so it's very different than novel writing. The episodes tend to be shorter than chapters, and a lot of times have kind of these cliffhanger endings. So I guess if you think like different seasons on Netflix, how you have different episodes and different seasons, and they can go on and on, for many seasons or a few seasons. That's kind of what serial fiction is. And there are many different types of serial fiction. Romance, of course, is always a huge popular genre, but like there are many, many different genres on serial fiction and many different platforms, depending on reader interest. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say serial fiction ties a lot with like manga and with comics, where you just have this long stream of you're following these characters through as different plots kind of peak and fall, and that's kind of the key to serialized fiction, or at least the long running kinds of serialized fiction, where you're basically just following this cast of characters or this single character throughout a major, huge world.
That's awesome. Let's see. Why would someone want to do serial fiction?
I can start, JP, if you want. I think, JP and I, as you will hear us talk about all the time, are huge proponents of author community. So that's why we do our podcast. We're in all kinds of Discords and Slacks and whatever, where we talk to other authors. And so a lot of the feedback I hear is that people really like the accountability. So you're on a weekly schedule, whatever, you're putting out 1, 2, 3, 5 episodes a week, whatever it is, and you have to get your episodes out on your schedule. So like procrastination, writer's block, that's not an option. You have to sit down and get your words out. And a lot of authors also like that immediate feedback. So you see it out in the world immediately, and you get reader feedback immediately, which is not the same as with a novel at all. So the 2 things that I hear most commonly is the accountability. And, especially like a lot of authors that I've talked to that maybe have ADHD or whatever and struggle with longer works, the shorter chunks are manageable. I have ADHD myself. So, so that and the interaction with readers, I think, are 2 of the biggest benefits.
Yeah, I would say there is this wonderful proximity you have to readers, because sometimes these episodes are getting written only a few weeks before they're getting published, or some people it's a couple days before it gets published. And so your reader is almost on the same journey as you, the author, and there is this camaraderie with that as long as you can get the type of communication, either through the platform you're using or through social media, you can kind of direct where the story goes as a reader, which is really fun. And then for me, like why I would want to do this is I really like sitcom-like stories, and I wanted to do something humorous. And so like my serial focuses more as almost like a sitcom. And so every week, what are these crazy people doing? And so it was really fun hitting it in that aspect as opposed to writing it as a novel.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely really interesting to think about why different people might want to do serial fiction. Now, you mentioned earlier that there are some major differences between serialized fiction and novel writing, and you guys kind of expanded on that a little bit. What other pros and cons might you say serial has over novels?
You want me to go, Christine?
Sure.
I would say the con to serialized fiction is usually because you have to process this really quickly. You have these reader expectations for you to have new material out. You're not going to be able to get all of the editing, all of the revisions, all of the different pieces that go into novel writing. And so you're going to be handing your readers a less polished piece of work. Now, the plus side is serialized readers expect this more or less. The majority of them are expecting that you're tearing through this, you're giving them new content quickly, and so they're ready for that. But you have to be able to understand that you may run into issues, you may have a ton more typos, but it doesn't mean that you should neglect the fact that you need to edit it. But what it does mean is that there is just significantly less control once you have the story already out. You can't go back. You can sometimes, but you can't do major revisions without having to be like, hey, readers, you know how you really enjoyed episode 2? Well, it's 100% different now. So even though we're on episode 94, just go back and read it. Like, it doesn't work that way. And that's something you lose when you do serialized fiction as opposed to novel writing.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think I have too much to add to that. That is the con, is you can't go back if you're like, oh wait, I want to drop this in the plot earlier. You can't do that. But it pushes your creativity too. So you're like, oh, well, that's the way that it is. So now I have to figure out where we're going. I mean, there's a bit of adrenaline to it. You're like, oh, we're just gotta go. I don't know where we're going, but it's gonna, and sometimes I feel like, you get these creative ideas that maybe if you were more structured, you wouldn't have had. I think serial fiction pushes writers who are either pantsers or plotters more towards the center, because you can't just straight pants. I don't think. Maybe you can, but I think you have to have an ending in mind. And I don't think you can do a detailed plot either, because it's just impossible because it's so many episodes. So I think it does kind of make you more of a hybrid writer. A plantser kind of pushes you from the other end of the spectrum. So that's been fun for me too, to do things a bit differently. But yeah, I agree with what JP said.
Kit, me? Okay. All right. Where can someone publish serial fiction? Because I know there's a bunch, but people out there might not. So where would you say people can publish?
That is a big question. A lot of it depends on genre. So there are more options for romance readers, like Radish is a big one. If you're like into lit RPG, there's Royal Road, but that is a free site. So some of these are free and some of these are paid. So like Radish pays, Royal Road doesn't, Wattpad doesn't, but can if you're like up in the top. So there's like a lot of different ways like that. Kindle Vella obviously is the big one. Amazon is pushing right now, but there are lots of other options. I can't, like Inkit, Neovel, Novel Now. Oh boy, if I was just gonna list them, there are a ton. Later Press is starting right now. There are a lot also in the Asian market where readers read in English, but as always, look at the terms and conditions, because some of them are quite rights grabby. So they'll take your property and you'll be exclusive and stuck in those. And you have to look at the pay. And some of them have like numbers of episodes you must write before you can pull off. So always look at your terms and conditions. But there are a lot of different places where you could publish serial fiction right now.
Yeah. My serial with my co-writer is on Vela, and then we also promote it on Fictionate.
Oh, Fictionate, I
Mostly
missed, yeah.
Fictionate. Yeah, you did.
Whoops.
Mostly Fictionate for the international readers, so that they have something else that they can grab. And the plus side is, after we reviewed the terms and conditions, which I highly recommend anyone do, especially if they start on one platform and they want to move to another. It was basically, as long as it was hidden behind a paywall for Vela, it seemed to be acceptable that it could go somewhere else that was had that paywall. So we moved it to Fictionate so that we could promote it to international. And then another option, if you have a following, is through Patreon, and kind of submitting episodes in that fashion. And that way you have that closer proximity to your readers. I think for someone, that's a ton of overwhelming information. I was like, where should I publish this? I think someone needs to think about a couple of key factors, because you're going to lose pieces to it. So one, if you post for free, you'll probably get more audience participation. I don't know if it's going to be good audience participation, but you may get more of it. So like things like Wattpad, it seems to be very heavy on like a lot of comments and a lot of like progress. People know that you are going through iterations of this. On something like Vela, you potentially have more visibility. There's little communication to readers, so you have to promote on social media. And on the plus side, they have this bonus program. They have all these other wonderful bits and pieces to it. And then when you talk about things like Patreon, you need to have an established community. So you really have to look at each one and find out which fits best for what you want out of writing this serial.
That's some. Were you just going to say that's some really good information?
Yes,
Because that's that's what I was going to say. That's some really good information. I know I love, and also Kate, I'm going to speak for you on this, Webtoon, which is serial fiction, but in comic form. And they do a lot of, I mean, like a lot of them end up publishing graphic novels with their, the fiction that they've created, which is really awesome. So if you have an artist, that can be a good one too, Webtoon.
Yeah.
And there are more comic based serial places to publish online. So I think our next question is, how did you guys get into serial fiction, and when? And did you do it alone or with a co-writer?
Yeah. So how I got into it is just, again, in the indie author communities, in the Slack and the Discord communities, people were talking about it, right? And everyone got this email from Amazon, hey, we're doing this thing. And there was quite a lot of buzz about it. Like people were really excited. They're talking, it's going to be like KU Gold Rush. Everybody get in right now. So I guess that would have been in April of last year, 2021. Mm-hmm. And then I had really had no plans to do serial fiction. And then I was like, why not? So reached out to my co-writer and it was like, hey, you want to do this with me? This looks fun. And we're like, yeah, why not? Like there's nothing to lose, right? So put it up, see what happens. And so that's what we did. Had a story idea that was kind of like novel-ish and really had to go in and hack and change it for serial format because serials are not novels. So started with this little story seed, but now we're in our second season and writing into the third season, which we had no roadmap for. So I don't know, we just kind of jumped in the seat and drove. And I do love writing with the co-writer, which is amazing. I mean, there's another accountability piece there too, and things get done quickly. So yeah, that's how I got started in it. And I was just heard about it in the author community and jumped in. How about you, JP?
Yeah. Oh, Christine. So, I did not know what the heck I was doing. Ultimately, like I've been working on a co-writing project with an author for a novel for about 2 years now, and that will be coming out this year. But I've just been really active in the author community, and I was a co-host to the Right Away podcast. And then Christine was like, hey, Vela's coming out. I really want to do this podcast because there's no one else doing this podcast. And I just really need someone. And then we ended up talking, and I was like, you know what, why not add another podcast to this list of things. So I did that, and then it ended up being like, we need to find authors in our community, you know, who's writing Velas. So I'm thinking of all these people, and I've got like a list of authors that we can reach out to, and one of them was Jeff Elkins, who is known as the Dialogue Doctor, and he has a podcast of his own. And I messaged him, and I'm like, hey, are you doing a serial? And he was like, I am not. Do you want to do one together? And I read that, I paused because I was like, and then in my head, I'm like, this is the Dialogue Doctor, the person I would love to co-write with. Do I say no? And the answer was no, I don't say no. And so I jumped right on that bandwagon, and we ended up writing a serial together. And that's been a really fun journey, but it basically came out of left field. That's my answer.
Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. I think it's just, goes to show keeping your options in your mind and your goals open as a writer, because opportunities just come up that you don't expect.
Yeah. And also reaching out to other members of the community, being part of a community, finding those channels that you can, go through networking and all that. That's really cool. Both of those stories for how you guys got into it. Very interesting.
So which genres do you say work best? And by this, I mean, is this the genre you normally write in? Because I've heard a lot of Kindle Vella writers will then try a different genre. So is that what you're doing, or did you stick within the same?
I stuck within the same. What does best, if you look at the data does not lie. It's romance, paranormal, and paranormal romance. Those are the ones that are consistently ranking in the top, of which I am not writing, which is fine. I just stuck with what I love to write, which I'm doing a light sci-fi serial. I mean, it's not hard at all, really accessible. So doing a light sci-fi and doing a horror, because my co-writer really loves horror. So I'm like, let's do one of each, and we'll just see what goes on. And, the sci-fi is doing really well. Surprisingly, I'm like, we're ranking up there with the romance. So I can't complain about it. But, I just stuck with what I loved. So maybe not the smartest plan, but.
I mean, maybe. But yeah, I mean, Christine's right. Romance, and, that's really what grabs people. I mean, Radish, that's like practically their number one category. And it seems to be very similar in terms of Vella. My Vella is noted as paranormal humor. And I would say we're kind of like in that mid-range of, visibility. Christine is way higher than I am doing her science fiction. So I would say that science fiction has some grasp on there as well. But the question to like, did that impact what was wanted, what we wanted to write? And ultimately, Jeff and I had decided we just wanted to write something that made each other laugh. And we like, our goal is like he writes, and then I try to like come back and do revisions to make him laugh at what was written. It's kind of this like back and forth thing. So no, we were like, we're not going to change this. We just wanted to go in this direction because we thought it would be fun.
It's always fun to find somebody that you work well with and then just have fun with them. I think that's very admirable. Not just trying to go for the algorithm or whatever. How do you guys, this is kind of a side question, but how do you, does Vella give you information on your ranking? And did they do it by genre or category, or is it like every story published gets like a number?
So both. So there's an overall ranking. So, and they only show the top 250 serials. So weekly, readers can give you what is called a fave. So if you're the fave story of the week, once a week, they can give you their fave. And if you get enough, your story can get a crown if you're in the top 250 Vellas. So they only show the top 250, and it's all categories. That said, they have tags, subcategories. So some of the main categories are like fantasy or science fiction or whatever, nonfiction, romance. So they have main categories, and then they have tags. So that you can see, like, if you go into fantasy, it's going to be a different list. You can see the top, 10 fantasy right away versus the overall list. So they do have it both ways. But if you just go on to like the Vella homepage, what you're going to see right away is that overall list of the top ranking serials.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I see. And then I know, Christine, you talked about before how you edit, what your workflow is. Could you go over your basic workflow and your current position on editors?
It's
Well,
different from novels because
yeah.
everybody says novels you need an editor.
You
So
do.
what
Like,
about
you
serial?
can't do developmental editing in serial, right? Like that's just not a thing. You can't go back and developmental edit. So we did have like someone doing some line editing and like consistency stuff for us for the first season of both serials. But with the expectations of readers and with just how fast it goes, it wasn't practical. So we had this lovely plan. We had alpha readers, beta readers, editor. Then I'd put it through Pro Writing Aid and then it would go out. And that has devolved. So right now the horror is just like there's no alpha or beta or editor. It's just Pro Writing Aid and out. Still have alpha, beta, and Pro Writing Aid for the sci-fi. So it's going through that. But yeah, we just didn't like the editor was not really cost effective and not really practical for what we're doing. So we're doing our best with it. Like we haven't got complaints. I had one reader say like, hey, you had a typo in this episode. So I was like, oh, okay. So if it's like one episode, nobody really cares. So, but we're doing our best. Yeah, it's way different than novel editing, like 100%.
And JP, what about your workflow and stance on editors?
So I say this with the caveat that like Christine, Jeff, and I are all certified 3-story method editors. And before that, like I'm very much in that like second process for writing. So Jeff always first drafts, and then I come in and I'm doing the revisions, and I'm looking for any of those like errors within the document.
Mhm.
So because this is all the caveats, because we're co-writing, because I've had a little bit of experience with that sort of editing process, we don't have an editor per se. And instead we do this process, and then we stream it through Pro Writing Aid. We make it as clean as possible. The only 2 complaints I have is I missed when Jeff put one of our characters, whose name is Doris, with 2 R's at one point. Thanks, Christine. And then one opening quotation in one episode. So 25 episodes in at this point, I think, and those are the 2 complaints. Like I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That is, co-writing is a bit different because you are kind of editing each other's work, and we are both editors, which does help. So yeah, I mean, you don't want to be throwing up really rough stuff, right? Because you're going to lose your readers if there are too many grammar or typos or spelling or whatever, formatting issues. But yeah, I guess so. Take that for what it's worth.
I think that's the key difference between Wattpad and Vella. Wattpad's free, so your readers are going to expect that there could be more errors that they can point out. But Vella is paid for. So even though you're coming to this without an editor, perhaps, you still need to provide them with the cleanest document you can possibly provide, because they are still paying for a service, and they're not paying for a ton of misspellings and unreadable material. I was looking for the word. It was somewhere in there. But that's, editing in the process. But yes, they are looking for content that is at least as good as you can make it. And I think that's the key difference between the 2.
So it's been quite a bit of time since at least Kindle Vella like rocked the world with its like, look, serial fiction is a thing that you may or may not have known to people. So would you say that the market's really saturated? And if so, how do you try to build an audience? Or if it's not saturated, how do you build an audience?
Saturated in terms of like serial fiction sites, or in terms of,
I guess whichever. Like,
yeah,
would you say that in general, it's very saturated?
there are a lot of different serial platforms, and I know that attracting readers is always the issue. Like, how do we attract readers to a new platform? And Radish has done very well with it. Wattpad is free, so like they get a lot of readers. Amazon is still in beta with their Vella, but it's coming. Like, I don't know about you, JP, but I was kind of like for a while, like, oh, we don't really have a lot of readers, and it has spiked, especially with Amazon finally getting on Android. I saw a huge spike after they went on Android in terms of readers. And they do a lot of market push that other platforms can't do. So, every time I'm on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, there's a Vela ad that pops up. I mean, they put a billboard in Times Square. So, I think they're doing their best to get it out. And of course, the indie authors on there always hustle. Indie authors, of course, hustle social media, putting out their own ads. So I went in with no expectations though. So I'm just like, I have readers like consistently every month, and there's a lot of them. So, I mean, that's cool. So I'm pleased with the way that it's going. I think the market is a bit saturated, but I think if anyone can kind of push through it, it's probably Amazon.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think putting serial fiction on Vela, as opposed to these separate apps, it gave potential, like, I don't want to say validity, because that's not the word I'm looking for, but it basically put a focus back on serial fiction, because you can access Vela episodes on the Kindle app. So many people use Kindle to read books, and to say, like, right next to, whatever book you're reading, there is my Vela sitting right next to it. Like, you can pick either one and read those on this app. That gives some sort of a power to serialized fiction. So I think that's one thing that I really like about Vela, is that there's already this established reader base, and there is now visibility to serialized fiction to give some people those, like, oh, this is something I could read short little bits of, and then I can go to the next episode. It's not too dissimilar from reading books, so you could potentially have that crossover. In terms of saturation within Vela, sure, there are quite a handful of books in there. But I think at the same time, like Christine said, especially when it came to Android, like, we've had a little bit of a spike in readers. And, month over month, we've had consistent, numbers of, different people coming in and reading through the whole thing. So it's not disappointing at the moment. I'm still enjoying the program and the platform. So I would say maybe a little saturated, but I'm not mad.
Oh, so that brings in a question we skipped over or passed over, but how lucrative would you say, you don't have to tell us your numbers, but in general, would you say serial fiction is?
I would say it depends.
Yes.
It depends. It depends a lot on visibility and how many readers, of course, you're bringing to your serial. Speaking on Vela, because that's obviously the platform that I'm most familiar with, those top 5 authors are making a lot of money, like a lot. I'm more like a mid-list author, so I'm happy with the money I'm making. It's more money than I've ever made doing fiction, so I'm like, that's cool. But if you don't have visibility, or maybe you're new and really don't understand, how to connect in author communities to get some help, or how to do social media, or maybe to run a little Facebook ad for your serial, there's definitely an abyss, right? Where you're not going to be making much money. So, yeah.
To clarify, to Christine's point, by a lot, some of those authors are making like 5 figures a month, which is a lot. In comparison, like, I would say that, the serial I'm doing, that's in the mid-ish range, and we're seeing a little or we're seeing less than about 1,000 a month, and obviously, like, it's split between us, but at the same point, like, that's not too disappointing. Some months it's a bit less than 500 or so, but at the same time, like, it's enough to keep us going, and we roughly know, like, how many people we need to bring in, so we know how much we need to market it, and that's been a nice little addition to the pocketbooks, especially for someone who's just starting out and being like, oh, my writing, it has value. And, I can see a future where, more and more of these novels and other pieces of work can really be that supporting piece for me.
Yeah. And there's really no downside, right? Because in the terms, you can still turn it into long form fiction as long as, you have 10 episodes up and the last one's been up for 30 days. You can put them out in novellas or novels, wherever you kind of want. So, I mean, yeah, you can write it in serial format, get paid, and then still turn it into a book if that's, your plan. So, which there are pros and cons of doing that as well. But yeah.
Nice. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
It seems like a real confidence booster for beginning writers as well, or people who have been writing but are starting a career with it. So
Definitely.
That's good. Good news for you and me, Kate.
Yes.
So you guys are co-hosts of your own podcast, the Reader's Serial Fiction Show. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Yeah, sure. So we have two podcasts. We do our Reader Serial Fiction Show and a Writer Serial Fiction Show, and they're kind of companion podcasts. So we release them at the same time. So the one for readers, we do some narration of the first episode, about half of it, because that's what Amazon is allowing us to do at the moment. And then we interview the writer, and talk about things that readers would be interested in about their story. And then we do a companion podcast for writers where we talk about craft, episode construction, character construction, tips for writing those kind of serials in the genre, tips for the platform or for marketing or for whatever. So yeah, and it just got started because I was looking to learn about it. When Vela got announced, I was looking for a podcast. I'm like, because that's how I learn. That's how I learn everything in the writing world, is like, I'm going to listen to a podcast about it while I'm, in the kitchen or jogging or whatever. And there was nothing. I'm like, but how am I going to learn about serial fiction if there's no podcast about it? So I'm like, well, I guess I'll start one then, and I can just selfishly talk to other authors and learn from them. And that's what we've been doing. And it's been wonderful. Like, I've learned so much from other authors, found so many cool stories. And yeah, it's been delightful. And then, yeah, I was in Slack crying that I had no co-host. So JP offered to help me out with that
before me.
I tried. And it's been a really fun journey because we've talked to really well-established authors like Hugh Howey, and we've also even talked with like Audrey Carlin, who is currently #1 in Kindle Vella, and basically any author, and they almost always have this like really strong resonating theme, which is that the community of Vella, the other authors, as they've kind of come together and talked about like, well, what's everyone else doing? How are things working? Like, that has been the pinnacle for everyone to feel like they have not necessarily made it, but they feel like they have this community around them that is guiding them, and that like we're all in this together. And that has been like a wonderful feeling to have. And it's been a wonderful feeling to talk about with other authors.
That's really awesome. I'm all about writing community. I talk about it on the podcast a bunch. I feel like I talk to Kate about it all the time. She's like, you don't need to. You can just join one. You don't need to start. I'm like, I need to start 100 of them. So, yeah.
So what would you say has been your favorite serial that you've reviewed so far?
Oh boy.
Or a couple, because most of us don't have one favorite. So
yeah,
no,
and
it
depends by genre too, right? Like, there have been a lot that I've been really loving. Like, I'm thinking of all the ones that came on our podcast, and they've all been great. I mean, Hugh Howey's biography is hilarious. That man has led a wild life. If you haven't read that, Audrey's Callie Chase came on with Bug, which is amazing, dystopian. Blackwell came on with Granite Windstar. That one's amazing. Oh boy. I feel like Naomi Alt came on with Chew. Like, if you like horror, that one is fantastic. I am at heart a sci-fi fantasy girl. That is my favorite genre. I've been reading LPM Sinclair's Crimson Steel, which is a gender bent Witcher, which I love. It's really cool. And then I've been reading some rock star romance that I'm not even a romance writer, but I've been reading this Wicked Riff ones, and there's just so many music references in it that I just like, I crack up. So that one's by KB Lee. That's amazing. I know I'm going to forget a lot. There's just like so much good stuff on the platform that I'm blown away. Like every time I read a new serial, I'm like, this is amazing. There's so much talent.
Yeah,
JP.
definitely. You know, not that you've listed almost all of our backlog, but that's
Sorry.
fine.
No worries.
Yeah, no, but I'm in the same boat as you, Bug, Chew, all of those like post-apocalyptic ones are really fun to read. There is one that I really enjoy because of how meta it is, and that's Love, War, and Serialized Fiction
Oh,
by
yeah, it's
Jessica
so
Aaron.
good. I forgot that one.
Because it's written as if there are authors who are writing in this platform called Zella, and they're competing against each other, and it's kind of this enemies to lovers romance, and it is so meta and so funny and very cathartic to read as a Vella author.
Nice.
It's
I love
funny.
that.
I was
have
just,
to.
yeah, and like a lot of these people in our Discord too. So I was just joking because Pro Writing Aid sponsors our podcast, and she had it in there as Pro Comma Aid, and I was just like dying. I'm like, the Pro Comma Aid. But yeah, it's very meta and very like, if we had an author conference and what's going behind the scenes of Zella, like what are employees doing? It's hilarious. It's very funny.
Well, that is awesome.
Yeah.
It's a lot of new fiction for us all to get into. So thank you for that list.
Not that I don't have a huge to be read list anyway.
And Nerds is pretty good too.
And Molecule Thief and Dark is Away. Yeah. By someone named LP Styles, whoever that is.
All right. So where can our listeners find you? Either one. Go first. So if they want to look you up and be like, who are you? Where can they
Yeah, sure. I guess you can always check out my website. It's jprindfleishix.com. The IX is because I am the 9th. That is a true story. But Rindfleisch spelled Rindfleisch. And you can find me there. You can find me on social media, pretty much with the same name. And you can also check out my serial. It's called Nerds, NRDS, on Kindle Vella. And yeah.
Yeah. If you want to find me, ChristineDaigleBooks.com. The pen name with my co-author is lpstylesbooks.com. And we are serialfictionshow.com if you want to check out our podcast.
Yep. Oh, yeah. I should probably promote that.
Yeah, we should probably promote that too. Yep. And I have a couple of serials on Kindle Vella. The Molecule Thief is the sci-fi one that everyone's loving right now. So come check it out.
All right.
Well, we appreciate your time today. Thank you for coming onto the show. It was really great to talk to you guys, to get to know you. And thank you, listeners, for your support. You can hop on over to the Reader's Serial Fiction or the Writer's Serial Fiction shows to hear about some of the most interesting stories on Kindle Vella. There are links below to all of our social media if you want to follow us there as well. Good luck out there and stay safe.
Thanks.
See you later.